Welcome to school. This is Fantasy Academy. Everybody take your seats.
What's up, everybody? It's Elazar, aka the Flying Dutchman. Joining me today is my co-host Sammy, aka Schmilly Vanilli.
Sir,
What's up,
what's
Sam?
going
How's
on,
it
buddy?
going?
2 weeks away from fantasy. It's great.
Well, you say 2 weeks away from fantasy because our redraft league is
Well,
drafting in 2 weeks,
yeah.
but I feel you. I feel you.
Honestly, that just made me sad because I really, for some reason, thought that the first game of the season was in 2 weeks. But
Yeah, I know we still have some ways to go. I think we're looking at like 3.5 weeks, but it's getting closer. And it's also to me one of the most exciting times of the year is draft season, which
oh
means
my
it's
God,
time to talk draft strategy, sleepers, bad value, good value, you know, talk through the whole thing.
everything we know.
Yes, sir. So, where do you want to kick things off today?
So I think a good kind of standard of where we're going to be talking about are different tiers of running backs, because one of the draft strategies that's helped me pretty recently is, the best player available method, but I usually do it by tiers. Whereas if you have a C tier wide receiver that might be two spots below the ADP of a D tier running back, pick the receiver, right? You always want to be at the top of the curve of those tiers. So let's just go through some running backs, kind of break down the tiers of the top 15 to 20.
So, I think a lot of people would say, based on last year, I mean, if we're talking about your home leagues, your casual players, people look at last year, they think Saquon Barkley is going to repeat. Saquon Barkley is your RB1 this year. Saquon is not going to be that guy, I don't think. Not
I
to
think
say
he's
that
going
he's
to have a great season.
he's going to have a great season. He's going to
He's
be,
going to be worth
top 10, top five.
yeah, a first round draft pick, like you said, top five, for sure, top 10, but definitely a top five running back.
Right. For me, I think you can't go wrong with either Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs, of course. I might give Gibbs the slight edge, but it's pretty close. If you end
Bijan
up with either one of those, no, Gibbs.
gives the edge over Bijan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally think so. When you see how close Gibbs and Bijan were last year as well. Of course, I believe Gibbs, if I'm not mistaken, finished as the RB2 in the last season. While his situation in terms of his coaching might have changed a little bit, he is going to see more volume this year than he did last year. So I think on that alone, that makes for me Jahmyr Gibbs the number one front runner to become the RB1 this year.
Yeah, and I mean, if God forbid, a situation were to happen where David Montgomery goes down at some point during the season, Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is the clear RB1 in fantasy overall. If he can do what he does with the committee running back workload, being the only guy there, it's automatic RB1. And I do agree with you. I think that first tier of running backs is going to be Bijan, Saquon, Jahmyr Gibbs, and
I'm
no,
curious how you're going to round this up.
no,
That's it for you?
no, Bijan, Saquon, and Jahmyr Gibbs are going to be that A tier.
So
That's
I
the
think so. In terms of elite, I don't think I would agree with you, just depending on what your definition of elite is. If we're talking about pure upside in a situation like the running back situation, I would say you got to put CMC in there as well. I know that seems maybe kind of crazy given his age. He's in his year 30. He's 29 years old. He's, of course, coming off of a season where he was unavailable for most of the season and injured. But of course, it's Christian McCaffrey. He's one of one. He is one of the best running backs of all time and certainly one of the best fantasy players of all time. So I don't think you can ever count him out from the reports that we're hearing throughout the offseason and also training camp. CMC looks good to go. He looks healthy. So a healthy CMC you can never count out for an RB1 season.
Absolutely. But does the risk of an injury devalue him a little bit or enough to kind of drop him into that next tier? Whereas, a full healthy Christian McCaffrey, you can make an argument that, maybe you take him over somebody like Saquon. Maybe you take him over somebody like Gibbs or Bijan. Does that injury risk that comes with the age and that comes with everything that happened last year, does that make you a little bit nervous where you would drop him? Or more so, if you're drafting, would you take Saquon, Gibbs, and Bijan over Christian McCaffrey?
Well, certainly I would. Yes, I would take Gibbs and Bijan ahead of CMC. I'd take Saquon ahead of CMC. So there's no question about that. But we're talking about where does the tier end? And for me, it actually ends with Christian McCaffrey. So, I think what you're talking about is fair. He has the injury risk. There's the age, of course, really usually around 30. And then again, at 32, we see a deep drop off with running backs historically. But Christian McCaffrey is he's an animal.
He's a different beast.
Yeah, he's a beast. He's a unique specimen. So I think that risk you're talking about is what brings him to the back end of the first round of the draft. And it, also brings him to the back end of that tier that you're talking about. But I still think just purely on upside and talent and what he's done in his past alone, you have to put CMC in there together with those guys, just on the backside.
Yeah, I definitely see your point. Maybe I'll put him in like an A.5 tier, I guess, because I see what you're saying. I still would kind of drop him a little bit just because of the usage that Bijan and Saquon and Gibbs are going to have, whereas the 49ers are going to need to lean on him a lot. And look, that may play into his favor, that might not. Defenses might be waiting for Christian McCaffrey because realistically, it's him and Kittle. That's maybe until IU comes back. Having Christian McCaffrey take that workload on could play into the injury thing, could not. I wouldn't pass up on somebody like Christian McCaffrey if he came to me, if I was drafting in the late first round. Maybe, maybe kind of at that 8 spot is when I would consider McCaffrey. But it depends what kind of wide receivers are on the board. He definitely, even if I were to put him in the B tier, I would have him at the beginning of the B tier. So we really kind of have him, in that same position. But speaking of B tier, who are you looking at as the next 3 to 4 guys?
So I would say somebody with true RB1 upside if the situation and, sort of the script and health of the offense falls his way. I'm going back to my guy, Devon Achane. I think he is extremely undervalued. Extremely undervalued might be a little bit over the top because, of course, there's concerns about the offensive line. There's concerns about Tua's health, and we've seen that Achane with Tua is a much different person than Achane without Tua. But assuming that Miami is healthy and can afford to give them a little bit more protection than they did last year, you can't count out Achane to be, at least a top 5 RB, but even have the upside for, if he has some positive regression, he can sort of split the difference between his rookie season and his sophomore season as on efficiency alone. And if he's healthy and his team is healthy, Achane can make a push for RB1, in my opinion, as well.
He has a clear path for RB1. I mean, especially in a PPR league with his receiving upside.
Absolutely.
It's a very clear path for Achane to become the RB1 of the entire season.
Right. So in terms of running backs that fall within that range, I'm curious, we've just seen the week 2 preseason. We saw the Las Vegas Raiders play. And of course, everyone's seen the video now with Ashton Jeanty struggling behind a very poor line. It's preseason. Probably don't want to get ahead of ourselves just yet, but where would you rank Jeanty in terms of, the running back position?
I would still put him in the B tier. Absolutely. I don't think those couple of snaps really mean anything. I don't think that should scare anybody. I am slightly nervous about the O-line. But however, Ashton Jeanty was, first overall RB taken for a reason. And, you see a class like last year where the first running back wasn't taken until the second round. Clearly, there's an elite level of talent there. And regardless of the offensive line, he's going to get so much usage that he's bound to turn something into a good amount of yardage and touchdowns. And I have to look up the exact statistics, but there's a high percentage of his runs in college. His touchdown runs were like 50 yards and more. So like this guy clearly has the electricity, the breakout capabilities. He's got a burst of speed and he's strong. He may not be the tallest or biggest, but he's still a strong guy. And he could bounce off the first few tackles and really break open a bunch of big runs. Especially with the usage, I don't see any reason for him to be any lower than the second tier.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I would prefer Achane over Jeanty, even though in terms of their protection and their blocking, they're dealing with a relatively similar situation. Of course, that part of the reason for that is that we've seen Achane be efficient and be productive in NFL, whereas Jeanty, of course, as great of a prospect as he is coming into the league, we've yet to see him play against, NFL talents.
Absolutely.
I'm a big fan of rookies, not fading Jeanty by any means, but I would, if I'm at the back end of the first round and I'm, looking at the 1-2 turn, I would pick Achane before I would take Jeanty.
I think, I think that's valid. I personally would probably take Jeanty over Achane, because of the coaching staff. Pete Carroll is, run heavy coach, especially you saw what he did with Marshawn Lynch in Seattle. I think the vacated rushes from, everybody that left. He has no competition in the backfield. I mean, you have an aging Raheem Mostert, and I think Sincere McCormick is still over there. So I'm not too worried about that. And then also their receiving core. I mean, you have Brock Bowers, you have Jacoby Myers. I think the fact that their passing game isn't going to be as strong as others, let's just say, I think they're going to start relying heavily on Jeanty and just feed him the ball. Just volume alone, I'm keeping it Ashton in that second tier.
I hear that. I will say the one thing I have learned over the years is that volume doesn't always equal production. It, of course, depends very much on efficiency as well. But I think from what we see from what we saw in college, it's a very good bet that Jeanty will be an efficient rusher in this league.
Yeah, I like it. And also rounding out that second tier, I would probably keep Derrick Henry up there. You know, he just keeps on trucking.
Derrick Henry.
Think he's gonna, fall off, and then all of a sudden he's right back there up at the top of the, running back category. 2,000 yards last season. I'd have to pull up the touchdowns, but it's, he just keeps on doing it. And until he proves me otherwise, keep ranking him up high.
I think Derrick Henry is in many ways in a similar situation as Christian McCaffrey. He's an aging running back. Of course, McCaffrey probably has had a less clean bill of health over the years, but, on the one hand, you're taking the risk with somebody who is, already up there in terms of age for running backs. But then again, if you're getting Henry or you're getting CMC like around that late first round, early second round area, you're not betting on the age, you're betting on the talent.
And one thing to note about just Baltimore overall is that you look at every single running back you would put over Derrick Henry, right? 4, 5, 6 maybe running backs over Derrick Henry, right? Atlanta, we have a brand new quarterback. Essentially, he's played a couple of games in the season, but really we have a brand new quarterback, right? Philly, Saquon Barkley coming off this season, he's due for a regression. It's not going to repeat himself. San Francisco, Debo's gone. Ayuk's out for a while. Christian McCaffrey didn't play the entire season last year, right? Jahmyr Gibbs and Detroit Lions, right? Ben Johnson's gone. Their defensive coordinator's gone. It's a shakeup over there. Maybe Achane, right? Injury-ridden season last season. Derrick Henry and the Baltimore Ravens right now is the only running back situation that has remained exactly the same as last year. So you can kind of look at that and say the Ravens, they didn't need to improve their team. They just needed to play better and win these games in order for them to get to their ultimate goal of a championship. But they're not switching anything up. No new coach, no new system. It's the same exact thing. So you can kind of expect something very close to what you saw from Derrick Henry last year.
Right. And I think that's a fair point. Of course, another thing that really favors Derrick Henry is the rushing upside of Lamar Jackson. In the case of Derrick Henry, with all the concussions that Tua has had, HN, is really the only run option when, he's in the backfield there. I think the dual threat of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry really lends itself to Henry being able to rip off a couple really nice and long runs.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, just him being the size that he is an every down back, right? So they're not going to pull him and put somebody in on the goal line. It's going to be him every single time. And they have a nice arsenal in their backfield. I mean, with Justice Hill, obviously Derrick Henry is not a pass catching back, so it's not what you should be looking at.
Keaton Mitchell.
But Keaton Mitchell, I'm excited to see.
I like Keaton Mitchell.
He's a nice complementary back to Derrick Henry, right? You have,
Absolutely.
I mean, essentially the Baltimore Ravens have one of each kind of running back. They have a powerful running back, they have a pass catcher running back, and then they have a fast, elusive running back. And if you utilize them the right way, that's a scary running back room. And that's kind of an underrated running back room. Not saying that Hill and Mitchell will be really fantasy relevant this season, maybe a plug and play when people are on buys. As a football team, it's an efficient running back room.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think we're worried about Keaton Mitchell or, Justice Hill. Keaton Mitchell or Justice Hill taking too many touches off of Derrick Henry, but it really is. It gives for a nice change of pace for the Baltimore Ravens and allows Henry to stay fresh. So I don't think they're necessarily a threat, but if anything, I agree with you that that they really complement Derrick Henry's role in this offense.
All right, so now, tier 3 is where it really gets interesting because there's a lot of people, but honestly, I would say tier 3 has 3 people.
So I'm going to say 4, but I'm interested to hear what your 3 are. So let's go ahead.
I think that 4 might be a borderline, and I could be convinced of otherwise. But right now, my tier 3, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think you should throw Jonathan Taylor in there.
That was
when Jonathan Taylor is healthy and plays a full season. He's easily an RB1, not RB1 overall, but I'm saying top 12, top 12 potential. Yeah. So I agree with your three. Otherwise, I would just probably add Jonathan Taylor to that list. I'm not really that big on this Colts offense in general, so I won't be drafting much of Jonathan Taylor this year. But just in terms of their upside and their potential in any given fantasy season, I think you should always throw Jonathan Taylor in the mix for that.
100%. And that was kind of like my thing you touched on is like his efficiency has been so dependent on the Colts offense. And, he's not in a situation where somebody will talk about in a minute, but like Alvin Kamara, that he could be productive even when the Saints are going to be the worst team in the league.
The thing I would say about Alvin Kamara is he is a volume-based running back at this point in his career. He's absolutely not an efficient running back by any means. He gets peppered with targets on the short throws,
Yeah.
especially in the Derek Carr days when he would overthrow Olave or Shaheed on every pass that he made.
Balls.
Yeah, hospital ball after hospital ball. So, Carr would be like, "Oh, let me take it easy," and then check down to Alvin Kamara like 10 times a game. So
yeah. But
when
that's
you have
what
that kind of usage, yeah, in a half PPR or PPR format, of course that brings up his value a lot. But in terms of purely efficiency, Kamara hasn't been efficient for quite some time.
No, but still, my point was that he's just dependent on the offense that you're in, right?
Absolutely,
The
yeah.
Colts offense, Jonathan Taylor's only productive when the Colts offense is humming. The Saints offense can be stagnant, but like you said, Alvin Kamara is going to get peppered with targets. He's going to be fantasy relevant, whether you want to call it efficient or not. He's going to be fantasy relevant regardless.
Right. I would say still, though, I mean, Jonathan Taylor cleared, I believe, 200 fantasy points last year. Definitely wasn't his best season. Of course, it doesn't come close to his
last 3 weeks or something where he went off for like 2 touchdowns a game and 200 yards, like at the very end.
Again, I'm not excited about Jonathan Taylor myself this year. I'm not going to be drafting him unless like he falls to me at a great value. But um, you still got to respect Jonathan Taylor, I think. I mean, I don't think you'll ever see a 2021 season from him again. But with that being said, if he falls to you at the right time with the right value, I think he's not a bad pick.
No, definitely not bad. But that's that's our tier 3. All right.
We'll move on to tier 4. I think I want to touch up on Chase Brown a little bit.
Did I overlook that?
I am a big fan of Chase Brown this year. I know that in the redraft league that you and I are in together, there is zero shot of me getting him, which makes me a little sad. The only, I would say, for lining to that is that he plays behind probably the worst offensive line, if not one of the worst offensive lines in the league. So there's that, but he's extremely efficient. We saw him last year. He really cemented himself as the running back one in this team. If they go with him in the long run and extend his contract beyond there, we will see. But this year, I think Chase Brown is a fantastic, running back to slot into your team. Or maybe if you go 0 RB on the first 2 rounds, and he falls to you in the 3rd round, he could be your RB1 too.
He'd be a great he will be an RB1 this season.
As in
and
the top 12.
It was, because I remember, I think when we were watching a couple of his rookie year 2 years ago, he broke off a couple of these big runs, and we look at each other and we're like, yeah, he might be something special. And then last year, we both knew it too. And we were drafting him all over the place last year. I mean, I took him in Dynasty, you took him in redraft, and you knew, like, it was like Zach Moss is kind of like all right, let's see if Chase Brown kind of pans out, but we still have Zach Moss kind of thing. And then as soon as he goes down, Chase Brown steps right up, and he's going to be
crushes it. Yeah.
I
mean, speaking of Zach Moss is not there anymore. Are we worried about Samaje Perine? I'm not.
Nope.
Taj Brooks, like there's something to like there, but he fell in the draft to the 6th round, I believe, for a reason, and it's because there's concerns there as well. So I mean, if Chase Brown were to, God forbid, go down, then maybe a nice dart throw would be Taj Brooks or Samaje Perine. But I'm not feeling threatened by either one of them in terms of Chase Brown.
My dart throw is that if Brown goes down, they're going to sign somebody. I don't think either one of those are people that could take up the RB1 workload. Perine is too slow. And Taj Brooks, to be honest, I haven't watched a lot of stuff on Taj Brooks, but like 6th round draft pick, it's nothing to be afraid of. They'd probably go out and pick Zach Moss back up or something like that,
I don't know. With this neck injury, I don't think they'll be picking up Zach Moss anytime soon.
Not. And then the other 2 people in our 3rd tier, we have Bucky Irving. Right now, with Rachaad White's injury, holds a little bit more value. Obviously, we can mention Sean Tucker for a late round sleeper as a handcuff. I think he's going to get worked in a lot more, especially due to Rachaad White's injury. But Bucky Irving, I mean, he's efficient. He is just all around solid. I mean, his pass catching, his bursts, his whatever the tackle breakability word is for Bucky Irving, he's got it. another year in that system, I think he will finish as a top 10 running back this season for sure.
You think he will? Bucky Irving is an interesting one. I think he has the ability to go in that top 12 range for sure. I think it's very likely that he will actually, but I'm actually still a little concerned about drafting Bucky Irving. I think with Liam Cohen leaving, you might see a different type of offense. We're not exactly sure where we're going to get there. I do think Bucky Irving is the clear RB1 at this point, given that Rashad White, of course, has went down. And if he has lingering injury issues going into week one, then it's Bucky Irving's backfield to earn, but also to lose. So I think Bucky Irving is a decent pick. He's just another player that I won't be targeting myself so much. I think once we're in that range, I would probably rather go with, the Drake Londons, the Brock Bowers of the world, but that's
Yeah.
just me.
Yeah, I see it. I mean, to me, Tampa Bay seems like a if it ain't broke, don't fix it situation. You saw what they were able to do last year. Obviously, they had the injuries, to Godwin and Evans, so it got a little bit more tough for them down the stretch. But obviously, they can't beat the Falcons, so don't matter. But in the other games where it's not the Falcons, they're an efficient offense, especially through the air. And when you have such a crazy aerial game, it's going to be a lot easier to open up the run game. And I think especially with Igbuka coming in and, stepping up like he is in training camp and like he did in the preseason, having Mike Evans on the outside, even, and then you have McMillan and then they drafted Tez Johnson. I mean, they have a fantastic wide receiver room. And then Chris Godwin comes back. I think the ball is just going to continue to fly and give Bucky Irving those opportunities to really catch them for some nice big runs.
Absolutely. I mean, as a pass catcher, I do like Bucky Irving a lot.
Yeah,
he was
right.
a sleeper going into last year for me. Unfortunately, he got picked in a lot of my leagues because I had more savvy people in my leagues than I gave him credit for. But Bucky Irving, great player. Yeah, certainly not going to deny that. I actually would like to kick off the next tier because when it comes to this next tier of running backs, I'm very excited about one particular person, and his name is Amarian Hampton.
Buddy.
Very, very big on Amarian Hampton.
Ooh, buddy.
Unfortunately, the market's caught up a little bit. So if you're drafting later into this preseason, like a lot of people will be, you kind of missed the boat on the extreme value of Amarian Hampton. Of course, Najee Harris and his eye. That's a major concern as if one of your, 1A, 1B running backs is not able to see, that's a problem.
Honestly, if he doesn't dress up as a pirate for their Halloween party, it is a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know. You might not think it's so funny when he's sitting on the bench and Amarian Hampton is ripping off 150 yards in the game. Of
Realistically,
course,
what else did they bring him in for? Everybody knew they were drafting a running back in the first round. You know what you get with Najee Harris, right? Did anybody really expect? And then I've heard people say, "Oh yes, so he's gonna because he's already a pro, and they're gonna start him the season, and then slowly but surely, Amari Hampton's ready. There's no like he is one of those backs. If you just look at him, he is a NFL ready running back. You look at the intangibles that he has. You look at his cutting ability. You look at his ball control. He's I have always been under the impression Amari Hampton's going to be the guy very
right.
quick. Even if they
Yeah.
did start out with Najee Harris week 1, week 2, by week 3, Amari Hampton was going to take over the backfield.
Yeah, I think so too. I've been big on Hampton even before the Najee news came out. So, of course, with that news, that's why he's now going up to the 3 and 4 turn instead of being back in like the end of the 4th or the 5th round. With that being said, I mean, let's just talk about his situation. He's in a run first offense under Harbaugh. He's, I think he's just in an excellent situation already. And then, of course, that the talent is there, explosiveness is there. Najee Harris is a fine running back, serviceable. But like you said, we've seen him for a few years now already, and we know what we're going to get with him. He's not extremely efficient. He's not very explosive. So, he's the kind of guy you bring in to give your RB1 a breather. Maybe to be the 1B in a committee, but he's not going to be the centerpiece of your offense by any means. And I think Amarian Hampton in a run first offense like the one we're going to see in LA this year, I think that he very much can be that guy. And of course, then you're also looking at Ladd McConkey, you're looking at the wide receiver options that they have there as well. It takes a little bit of the pressure off. Of course, this is still going to be a run first offense in my opinion, but this is a well-rounded offense, and I think the situation almost couldn't have been better for explosive rookie running back like Amarian. Amarian Hampton, he is a guy that I will definitely be targeting now in the 3rd round. I think if you're missing out on guys like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, if you're not getting to the Ladd McConkeys and Chase Browns in that earlier part of the draft. Marion Hampton is a great guy to slot into your RB2 position. Will he be right out the gates what you want him to be? It's possible that it might take a week or two to get him going. I personally think, especially if Najee is not playing, that they're just going to put him on the field right off the bat. And I think you probably have a season-long pleasure and enjoyment and entertainment from Marion Hampton.
I mean, he's going to get, I mean, obviously now with the injury and everything, like you said, but even if Najee was there, he was going to get worked in week 1 anyway. I would have started him week 1 anyway.
Right. I have a question then. Of course, we both agree Marion was the next person on this list, I would assume. James Cook or Kenneth Walker?
James Cook or Kenneth Walker? I think there are a couple that I would put above the two of those guys, but I like Kenneth Walker this year. I'm nervous for the injuries, but I like Kenneth Walker this year. James Cook, whatever his holdout situation's going on, it's weird. I don't think he deserves the money that he's asking for. He's good, don't get me wrong, but his fantasy output came from touchdowns last season and not many yards, and he wasn't very efficient. Most of his rushes went for 2 or 3 yards. He just broke free for a couple ones. He was involved in the passing game just because Josh Allen spreads the ball out. And then he might not be in Buffalo, or, they might not pick up his option or do whatever the situation, contract, or give him the extension, whatever he wants. And, he might just be like, cool, I've shown what I need to show, and we have a committee, and I might just kind of fall back into the Ray Davis and Ty Johnson situation and just wait for next season and sign with the team that wants to pay me. So
absolutely.
I get nervous about his attitude, and just the uncertainty of Buffalo. The only person I really want in Buffalo is Josh Allen.
I agree with you on James Cook. He's too touchdown dependent to get to where he was last year. Surely we're going to see some regression there. And with the regression, then I wouldn't say I'm completely out on James Cook, stays in Buffalo or anything like that. But for the value that they're asking for him in terms of, ADP and ranking him, I'm going to take some other guys ahead of him. I would say, last year, part of the reason he was involved in the passing game is also because of a lack of options. Not to say that the options have gotten so much better this year, because they haven't. But, Keon Coleman is another year older and more mature. I think he'll make a step up this year as well. Khalil Shakir, I think he's going into year 3 now, so he'll hopefully step it up even more. I don't know if you can build your offense around him or your passing game around him, but he's shown to be a fine receiver as well. So I think with the regression and touchdowns coming up, James Cook is not necessarily the guy that I'm targeting.
No. And there are actually, might be a hot take, but there are 3 guys that I would actually take above James Cook. First one might be pretty obvious, but Kyren Williams. I don't think Kyren Williams, again, also, I think he is due for a regression as well, especially now monitoring this Matthew Stafford situation. So speaking about him in a best case scenario, I still think, he is their go-to guy. I'm not worried about Corum. I'm not worried about Jarquez Hunter. But maybe a little bit Jarquez, but Corum, didn't really do much with what he got last year, and you have Puka and you have, what's his name? The guy that catches the football.
Devontae Adams.
Devontae Adams. Thank you very much. You have Puka and you Devontae Adams, right? In a healthy offensive system, you have the aerial attack to take the pressure off running the ball. So it's one of those kind of things where it's like, I'm looking at the situation, right? I'm not looking at, somebody who is really their only option and they are going to pound the ball every single time and the defense knows what's coming, right? You have to open up the field, and that's kind of what I like to look at when I'm looking at running back situations is, am I going to want to bang my head against the wall every time they get the ball because all they can do is run it up the gut and get 2 yards on the play? Or is it going to be like, oh, that's a nice play action, right? Boom, they get a 30-yard pass, right? Oh, you thought they were going to run it again. No, it's a little slant to the middle of the field. And then he breaks it up the middle for 60-yard run. That's the type of offense you want.
So I would say I don't really see that being a consistent outcome for this LA offense. I am not very high on the LA offense at all, actually, especially not their running game. Last year, I think LA's offense ranked as one of the lowest in terms of running efficiency. I believe they may have even been the lowest, but they're definitely down there. I think Kyren Williams has been able to put together good seasons in terms of fantasy purely on volume these last 2 years. Sean McVay has shown in the past that he's not always very invested in his running backs. So I think with somebody like Blake Corum, you're actually getting something pretty similar to what Kyren Williams, the skill set and the toolbox that he has to offer. So especially given the low draft capital that was invested in Kyren Williams, 3 years ago, I don't see why LA is necessarily going to stick with somebody like him. I think you're going to start seeing not necessarily a committee, but you're definitely going to see some touches being taken off Kyren. That efficiency, I don't think, is going to get much better, both from the team's perspective, but also from Kyren's perspective. So for me personally, Kyren is somebody I would say I'm almost fading because he has, in a fantasy draft, very high capital to pay that for Kyren Williams because I don't believe in this offense. Of course, offenses that do better tend to have more opportunities to run the ball. So we're not going to see that as much. And just purely, I'm concerned about him losing opportunity, which is the only reason we've seen so much output from him these last 2 years.
So let me ask you a question. Kyren Williams or Alvin Kamara?
Kyren Williams, of course. But I mean, you're picking them in very different parts of the draft.
He's definitely a third, fourth.
Third, fourth?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Kyren Williams is going in the third round, but he's even a third round pick. I feel like is capital that I want to give up.
So Kyren Williams or James Conner?
So James Conner, again, different part of the draft, really. I would much rather take somebody else in the Kyren Williams range. Like even if it's somebody like Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, give me one of those guys, spice up my wide receiver room a little bit, and then wait a couple of rounds and pick up James Conner. Of course, James Conner has his own concerns with health, but when he's healthy,
I was just trying to gauge like where overall you were kind of sitting on Kyren Williams.
Yeah, I'm not high on Kyren Williams.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, look, that's fair enough. And then a couple of honorable mentions, and I already know your opinion. You already know what I'm about to say. You don't even want to talk about him.
I don't want to talk about it. He hurt me too much last year.
That's fine. I get it because he was so good to me, and he was so bad to you.
He was so bad.
Ladies and gentlemen, that man is Breece Hall. Breece Hall 2 years ago basically won me my fantasy league along with CeeDee Lamb, and Puka and Kyren Williams. It's a great situation. However, last year when he was on Elazar's team, he did not know how to play football, and
I want to come actually to Breece's defense here. It wasn't really his fault.
No,
you bring in Aaron Rodgers and it's not like the Jets are a great organization. We know that. I think I've learned my lesson. Even though I would take Garrett Wilson in a third round, I don't think I'd be excited about any Jets player ever. And that's just being burned by them. But Breece Hall is a good football player. The problem is...
Yeah, to add in real quick, if you took all the running backs and took them off every team and they were just a running back, Breece Hall is a top 10 talent in the league.
Right.
For sure.
No, I could see that. But the problem is last year, of course, we thought going into this season that this Jets offensive line was a lot better than they actually played. And then you have Aaron Rodgers, who is a statue, was not good by any means, missed Breece Hall on a couple easy checkdowns as well. So, and maybe it was just my bias, but it seemed like he almost hated Breece when he was on the field. So I don't think you can blame him busting as a first round pick. I don't think you can blame that exclusively on Breece by any means. I think it's very much to do with the situation. But I think that actually makes a very good point, which is similar to what I was trying to say about Kyren Williams, what I was trying to say about Jeanty, and even the concerns you might have with someone like Devon Achane is a situation really, really matters. That, the pressure being taken off of the run game by having efficient passing, of course, also blocking and, the time that an offensive line gives you. Those things are so important for a running back to be efficient, even if they are talented. So for that reason, still, I don't like the Jets. I'm not going to really be targeting Breece Hall, but I just want to defend him in the sense that I think he's a fine football player. In fact, I think he's a great football player, but I just don't like the situation.
100%. The only thing that I would see Breece Hall have going for him this season is that he's in a contract year, and that he is definitely not in the future plans of the New York Jets. They have Braylon Allen and they have Isaiah Davis, and they really like the two of them. And they're not going to want to pay Breece Hall. Breece Hall deserves a better situation. I think, he's going to want to show out with the opportunities that he does have this season as much as he can. So, you have a little bit of extra motivation on his end. I don't think it's going to be a complete bust of a season for Breece Hall, but he is ranked way too high in his ADP for most of these players.
I agree. And I'm personally just, like I said, I think you draft for upside. I think Breece Hall is going to give you probably a consistent, let's say 15 points per game, maybe even not that. Yeah. I would say in a PPR league, if he gives you between 14, 15 points a game, I think that's a realistic realm of outcomes for him. One thing I'll say to defend Breece a little bit more is, of course, they got Justin Fields coming in now. That duality in the run game and the dual threat of it, that definitely bodes well for him. And of course, you are right, though. I think the Jets have shown that they are very much willing to take touches off of Brees. And, in passing down, they give it to Isaiah Davis. And in running between the tackles, they give it to Braylon Allen. So I think there's some real concerns as well about who gets the red zone touches. Last year, we saw Braylon Allen vulture a good amount of opportunities off of Brees Hall. So I see that happening again this year.
Yes, he did. And then down in Carolina, you have Chuba Hubbard, who sneaks into the top 20 and is kind of like a solid RB2. Now, unfortunately, you have your Jonathan Brooks situation. You hate to see it. He was injured and then he steps back on the field within a couple plays. He's injured again. But however, we saw this also when they had CMC. And when CMC went down, everybody rushed to the waiver wire to pick up Chuba Hubbard because Chuba Hubbard has been the most consistent running back when given these kind of opportunities. Now they've just handed him the keys. And they've said, here, this is your backfield now. Yes, Rico Dowdle's there. I think Rico Dowdle, he'll take some of the workload off of Chuba. But I think Chuba is a very fine RB2 for this fantasy season.
So would you say that you would pick Chuba Hubbard in the fifth round?
I would say in the fifth, sixth round. Yeah, right in that fifth, sixth turn.
Okay. So I personally don't love Chuba so much. I think last year you were either picking him up after the draft or, at the very end of your draft, sort of, let's say like the 13th, the 11th, the 12th round, whatever it may be. You were getting him for very, very cheap. On top of that, he had nobody behind him, really. Like we said, Jonathan Brooks was absent for a majority of the season and then became absent again. This year, I would be a little bit more concerned about Rico Dowdle than you're making it out to be. Not to say that Chuba is not the number one back in that field. I think he is and he will be. But you don't bring in Rico Dowdle for nothing. Of course, they did pay Chuba, but I think for the price that you're paying for Chuba this year compared to last year, I'm not super big on Chuba Hubbard myself. I know I've been saying that about a lot of these guys that fall in that like third to the sixth round range in terms of running backs. Right. I mean, I think the RB dead zone is kind of dead compared to what it was a few years ago. And the reason for that is because running backs have been sliding in fantasy drafts over the years. Of course, we prioritize the wide receiver position. We're better at identifying who is going to be a wide receiver one on the team. I don't mean in terms of fantasy, but I mean on their team. I think with the running backs, you have a higher chance that they bust, and there are more injury concerns. Of course, last year was an exception, but historically, over the last few years, running backs have had more health problems or have had more problems staying healthy. And I think teams are also, the committee approach is far more common now than it was, 10 years ago. So for me, I think when you start getting into the third, but especially the fourth, fifth, sixth round, that's the point when you really want to start taking chances on wide receiver talent more than running back talent. And of course, it depends also how your first couple of picks go. If you're taking two great wide receivers in your first two picks, then yeah, you might want to be looking at a guy like Kyren Williams or a guy like, Chuba Hubbard. But for me personally, again, in that range of like the fifth round pick, you can get Zay Flowers, you can get Jameson Williams, you can get a bunch of other guys that I think, I would rather have on my team than a Chuba Hubbard.
You would rather have Zay Flowers over Chuba Hubbard.
So you're right. I shouldn't have mentioned Zay Flowers because the truth is I'm actually not that big of a fan of Zay Flowers. I don't think he has shown in the 2 years that he's played that he is worth a very high pick. It's just that he's attached to Lamar Jackson that I think that gives this like real value. And he is a talented player, but with the way that the offense is set up and the amount of weapons they have in general, Zay is probably not at the top of my list either. But, I would take Jameson Williams over Chuba Hubbard. I would take, I don't know, it might sound kind of crazy, but I might wait and take Aaron Jones later in the sixth round than taking Chuba Hubbard in the fifth round.
Really? Aaron Jones is somebody that I'm completely fading and trying to draft Jordan Mason later in the draft because I think Jordan Mason might overtake the backfield this season.
Possible. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't think the RB dead zone is as real as it used to be because, like I said, RB value keeps sliding over the years. But I would still, I think, at least the approach that I like to take. Of course, you want to take the best players that are available on the board in the first couple of rounds. Then you want to start building out your team based on what you have there. But the way that I'm looking at the draft this year is because the RB value keeps sliding, everyone's going to be smashing wide receivers. And that's how it's been going these last 2 years. If you can get in early and get those high upside running backs, who might just rip off an RB1 overall season or an RB3 overall season, then you don't have to worry about that space between the 4th and 7th round.
So, because we're short on time, I did want to give one honorable mention. This running back is in a situation that is pretty much prime for the taking. They signed 2 running backs that were not efficient on either of their teams over the past couple of seasons. Drafted this guy in, I believe, the 4th round, could be the 5th round, but I think it was the 4th round, in a team that, traditionally has a solid run game. They have a great offensive line, even though they had one of their linemen retire. As Elazar is nodding his head up and down and up and down and up and down, I'm sure we are all understanding that I'm talking about Jaden Blue of the Dallas Cowboys. I think he is definitely worth a late round pick, because who knows what Jerry Jones is doing in Jerry World? Nobody. But all I know is that they signed 2 pretty bad running backs. Jaden Blue, this is your backfield, my brother. Take it.
So, I think on the unofficial depth chart, he's still behind Javonte Williams. But I agree with you. I wouldn't be worried about Javonte Williams. If you're drafting Jaden Blue, you're not going to slot him in week 1. You can't be doing that.
No.
But he's definitely worth that really late pick, where you might just get lucky. Well, I wouldn't even call it lucky. You might just get it right and end up drafting an RB1 from a team. Jaden Blue, I think is a
offense too. It's not
absolutely.
It's not like it's the Saints. Like Dallas Cowboys, while they may not win playoff games, they win regular season games.
You're right.
So they got a great passing game. They got a good quarterback. Whatever you want to say about Dak Prescott, he is a good quarterback.
Absolutely. I was going to say a healthy Dak makes for a good Dallas offense. So
yeah.
I agree with you on Blue. Great late pick for the running back position. I'm going to throw out one that's maybe kind of more of a dart throw, but I think given the health situation of the current RB1, Joe Mixon, Woody Marks is an interesting pick, late pick, I think, this year in the draft, because, if Mixon can't get right, you might just be looking at a guy who can take over that backfield in the middle or the end of the season.
Or you might be looking at the resurgence of Nick Chubb.
I find that unlikely. That guy has been through so many traumatic injuries that...
Shout out to Nick Chubb, though, man.
Shout out to Nick Chubb. We like Nick Chubb.
What a running back.
Last RB. Yeah. One more I want to drop is Dylan Sampson. With the Quinshon Judkins situation, you have to be thinking about the backup options. And
yeah,
I would say Samson should be on your radar for this year's draft, just purely because of what's going on with Judkins. As of right now, Quinshon has not signed his rookie deal. It could be that he sits out the entire season, in which case this is an open season and an open runway for
having some legal troubles too.
Well, right, then that's the reason why he's not being signed, is because of those troubles. So I'm big on Dylan Sampson, so he might be worth your pick.
Yeah. Well, that's our cue. That's all that we have today. Next time, we are going to be talking about our different tiers of wide receivers, some wide receiver sleepers, pretty much everything that we did today with running backs, but for, the guys that play the other positions, because fantasy is not just all about running backs.
Absolutely.
Anything else to add, Al?
No, that was everything. Thank you, Sam, for joining me. Looking forward to our next video. And to all of you watching at home, class dismissed.
Remember to do your homework.
I've been in my bag and trying